Hello again, it's Kevin Annett. I'm reading another excerpt from my upcoming book, Unrelenting. This is from chapter 2, entitled The Malefactor. It began in small places we'll never see, like any incubating virus. Hidden and deadly, it formed itself into official pronouncement, papal statute, joint stock companies, and eventually ships and their crews. Armed with Roman law and European canons, it struck outwards to subjugate and seize the entire world. It killed mercilessly, and then it spoke of healing. We know the official accounts of this plague, having been carefully inoculated to it, and thus incapable of shrinking from its horror. It's all in the past. Things are so very different now. I was raised in the culture it spawned, and that spawned it. As a boy, I sat quietly through our well-ordered church services and learned how God favors certain people and not others. How God tossed our forebears into earthly suffering because they had disobeyed Him. I learned to become permanently confused by loving a deity who had even had His own dearest child betrayed and flogged and ripped to pieces on a cross. Soon I lost something that had been born within me, that was more than innocence. More like a nebulous presence that was everything, a breath that some lingering indigenous people envision as an animal spirit who accompanies us and links us to all of creation. My animus was bound in chains as I became part of the plague, and I could imagine nothing but it. But somehow, years later, my time did come as a man, and my submerged spirit drifted out from its captivity so that I could finally understand the thing in which I had been raised, and that was responsible for the massacre of so many and so much. And being finally free, that spirit changed everything. The story of what we call genocide in Canada has been told, in part, but it has never been understood, because it's just a word. A life is very much the same. We can describe it, but we can never understand it. It is beyond understanding. I've spoken about the plague and what it did many times, but when my mouth opens to explain it, why it happened and what it actually is, another voice speaks instead, one that fogs more than it reveals. We're all like that. We're all children of the thing that we describe but never comprehend. I met this quandary the morning I handed a photocopied document to my fellow graduate students soon after my expulsion as a minister from the United Church. The page that I handed them was a report by a Dr. Peter Bryce that showed that half of the Indian children had died in the gulags we still call residential schools. The scholars looked at this document. They seemed briefly alarmed by it, and then they turned away from the mirror I had held up to them. It went on like that for many years, once I had become an exile to myself and my own people, and eventually even to the plague. I kept speaking to a barricade of backs. But truth slips past all of our arrangements, for it desires only to find a fertile nest in which to grow. And it did, even as the plague swept on. All of it changed me just like it did Canada and Rome. As opaque and unmoving as the arrangement appears, it must respond to a continual challenge, no matter how small. The thing adapts to each one of our assaults, but it is capable of dying. I stood next to myself outside the Vatican one October morning in 2009, and a new voice in me told an entity to leave that place. The next day, a tornado followed my words, and thus did I begin to understand. The plague came from us, not as an alien intruder from the outside. It moves and lives so easily among us and takes up residence again even after we have exposed and expelled it, because it is us. Only when I understood that could I do more than protest and expose it. I'm not a praying man, because I find I'm just talking to myself. Anyway, why does eternity require any sort of dialogue between me and itself? But I do know the power that has acted through me and dislodged the arrangement, a power that's just as much a part of me as the plague. That said, I sometimes feel that I was the problem all along. I never understood why so very few people were ever really bothered by the abomination that I revealed. My illusions crumble slowly. Still to this moment I grow angry and weary when the world ignores what I am uncovering and what I am attempting, as if humanity should be anything other than what it is. My father said that the only problem with idealists like me is that we can't relate to most of the human race. Nor should you, he always adds with a smile. Thank you. More to come.